It's Friday, September 25th, 2020. I'm Greg Nibbler, and this is Digital Trends Live. Yes, indeed. Hello, everyone. This is Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler, and thanks for joining us wherever you are. We appreciate it. We broadcast live here every weekday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, bringing you trending tech headlines, news, interviews, discussions, and more. Let's get started with the headlines. Amazon just held their fall hardware event, and they have gone all out with new devices, including a security drone. I'll give you a quick rundown on some of the updates. So the Echo devices received a major facelift, as they will no longer look like hockey pucks and instead go for more of a snow globe appearance. The new standard Echo will run on the AZ1 Neural Edge processor and will allow for Amazon Sidewalk connectivity, which is essentially a neighborhood mesh network that will connect devices that are on the edge of your property, like a Ring floodlight in your garden. The Echo Show 10 is also beefed up with a hardware feature that will allow it to follow you as you move around the room. In addition, you'll be able to stream Netflix from it, and it'll work with Zoom calls with a 13-megapixel camera on the front that should make you look a little clearer on some of those laptop cameras out there. And there is the Ring side of things, which includes a new suite of car security products, including a function that will allow for automatic video recording if you are pulled over. But the strangest and most futuristic updated hardware, though, has to be the Ring Always Home Cam. The era of home security drones is going mainstream. So the premise of this is that the drone will operate autonomously and be able to provide viewpoints you wouldn't normally get with the security camera. It records in 1080p while flying and looks kind of like a Ring doorbell strapped to a mini box fan. Naturally, it integrates with your other home security products, but it will be interesting to see how many people are into this one. It'll be out sometime next year for $250, and you can read all about the hardware updates at digitaltrends.com. Amazon has jumped into the very packed world of cloud streaming gaming with the impending launch of its service, Luna. So this is a crowded space with not only Google Stadia and NVIDIA's GeForce Now, plus Microsoft with Xbox Cloud Ultimate, but Amazon's hoping to differentiate itself in a few ways to stand out. The service itself is set up as a gaming channel subscriptions platform. Initially, Luna will cost only $6 a month, which will give access to a select run of older games like The Surge and Indivisible. Other channels will then come on board, with Ubisoft already announcing its channel on the platform with the promise of AAA games arriving on the service, like Far Cry 6 and Assassin's Creed Valhalla on the release days. The pricing for Ubisoft has not been announced. Luna will run on Amazon's AWS platform, which is the cloud backbone for a big portion of the internet, including Netflix. It's available for pre-registration on Fire TV, PC, Mac, and iOS, which is where Luna stands out compared to its competitors. There's a big backlash right now as Apple cracks down and makes it difficult for other game streaming apps in its App Store. Amazon is skipping the App Store altogether, though, by making Luna a web app, which is a unique workaround. There's also a Luna controller that you can purchase for $50, which you can use an Xbox or a DualShock controller as well as a keyboard and mouse. The exact release date hasn't been announced yet, but the cable channel style service has potential. You can read all about it at digitaltrends.com. As social media platforms continue to try to battle the scourge of misinformation ahead of the U.S. election, which is less than 6 weeks away, Twitter has released details about a test it's been conducting to keep people from haphazardly retweeting fake news without ever reading it first. The experiment was so successful it'll be rolling out to everyone soon, but it started off for Android users who were given a prompt when sharing an article suggesting that they should click on the link and read it first before sharing to, quote, promote informed discussion, unquote. As it turns out, it worked. The results have shown that people opened articles 40% more often when seeing the prompt than they would have otherwise when sharing a link, and also opened articles 33% more often when retweeting. That clearly doesn't stop everyone, but it can make a big difference when something gets shared over and over and over based on some ridiculous headline that links to an article of dubious origin or is just blatantly false information. Since it was successful on Android, the plan is now to roll it out to all iOS and other users with a few tweaks to make the notification just a little bit smaller. There isn't a timeline for the rollout yet, but expect it to happen soon. You can read more about it at digitaltrends.com. And finally, just a quick update for those of you looking to pre-order a PlayStation 5 ahead of the big release on November 12th. Not so fast. One thing that has been clear on both sides of the console wars is that getting your hands on one on the launch dates of the Xbox Series X and Sony PlayStation 5 may not be really easy to do. Despite concerns about supply issues, pre-orders went on sale briefly last week for the PS5 and quickly sold out everywhere and actually crashed some sites, with GameStop telling some users they had been banned even though they actually hadn't. Today it's back on sale again on GameStop's website, but it looks like there's still some issues going on. As of now, it appears you're put into a queue to order online, which is strange in its own right, and obviously There's still time before November, but people are excited about the games, and it's not like you can go wait in line for one really in real life. We'll keep you up to date on where to go and how to get it as soon as we find out at digitaltrends.com. And it is Friday, which means it's time for another edition of Work Life here on Digital Trends, where we have Ciara Pressler, who joins us to help us navigate that weird world in between work and life. How do we make it all work together? Well, that is what Ciara is going to help us out with. Ciara, hello. It's so good to see you. And what do you want to talk about here today?
Well, happy Friday, Greg. I know a lot of us are in transition right now, whether you are trying to help your kids get back to school, whether you're going back to school, or maybe you're starting a brand new job during COVID.
Yeah, there is a lot of that going on, and which is such a weird time to be doing that in general. But what are some things that people should be considering as they're going about this now?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see a lot of movement right now. We already are, because people are thinking about, like, what kind of job do I want to be doing? My work is so much of my life. And so we're trying out onboarding. Onboarding is that tricky time when you are learning the new job, training, getting to know a new company and a new culture.
And doing that is usually, something where you're probably talking to people, you're in person, but I know there's some other issues with that now, obviously.
So not just the job is new, but, all the skills you have to learn.
So going to this, how do we go about making it work? How do you go about making onboarding work?
Sure. Well, number one, obviously, is communication. Communicate with your team, communicate with that person who's training you, ask questions. It's not the time to worry about looking dumb. Whatever you ask, I'm sure people will appreciate that you really want to know how to get it right for your new company.
And communication always being important, and especially, like I was talking about, like now, with everything too. So some other big tips, some other tips that people should know as far as making it work and making sure you connect with that team. Looks like we're having just a little bit of a delay issue going on with our internet here, and it could be on my end. I'm not sure what's happening, but we'll let's see if I have you back here. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not, but I just want to continue on and talking about this onboarding process and what that's like, and just maybe a couple more tips that you would have for everybody.
Yeah, we're in that Zoom world right now, and there's literally like the storm of the century outside my windows. So probably my internet. But it's a metaphor, right? For onboarding. You could feel like you're in a storm, not really knowing what to do. And so, yeah, communication is really important. But you also want to take care of yourself, right? You might need to hunker down a little bit like you would in a storm and take care of yourself. You might not be able to fulfill your usual outside of work schedule. Learning something new is really mentally draining. And so make sure that you're getting plenty of rest and recovery on nights and weekends, and building in time to relax and refuel and attack it again on Monday morning.
I think that is such an important piece of advice too, to make sure that you have time to relax. And I will say this, just to clarify, there are storms going on right now. So here in Portland, and Ciara and I are both in Portland at different places. So that could be affecting the Zoom, but it's a perfect analogy. Ciara, this is some great advice. Now, for any last advice that you have for onboarding, and then where can people go to find out more about everything that you do?
Of course, I have a pro tip for you, and that is find out how your company or your boss measures success, and then track your own success and achievements. So when you go into that review, you know exactly what to report on and how to impress your new team. So if you need more pro tips, please visit me at pregamehq.
pregamehq.com. And again, with the stores going on, we had a little connectivity going on there, but that is a perfect analogy. Onboarding is hard no matter when it is, but certainly something to follow Ciara's advice. It's always great stuff, and we've got more at digitaltrends.com, so go there and check all of that out. All right, continuing on here with Digital Trends Live, I want to say thank you to everybody who's joining us wherever you are. We are very excited right now. We have joining us the Vice President and Lab Director for IBM Research, Dr. Jeff Welser, and this is something that I've IBM puts out every year, it's this 5 in 5, these predictions, and I always get so excited when this happens about what kind of changes in technology we can anticipate. And Doctor, thanks for being here. Do you want to walk through what this report is and maybe what some of the key findings are?
Absolutely. So yeah, every year we put out this 5 in 5, as you said, and we try and take a look at what are some major issues right now facing the world and society where some of the research we're doing we think could actually have real impact, and something that can have impact maybe in the next 5 years. So not 20 years from now, but maybe not next year either. So a little bit more kind of a thought leadership there. This year, what we focused on is, given all of the challenges we see in 2020 in particular, COVID-19, increasing climate change, et cetera, what can we do to find new solutions to help with those challenges? And the whole theme is around accelerating discovery of new materials to create a more sustainable future.
And as we see tech just advance so quickly, I would imagine that artificial intelligence is probably a part of this, trying to factor in where that's going to take us and different advancements with that. So I guess looking at that and from the climate side of things, what are some of the key things that you think could happen in this next 5 years?
Right, so you're exactly right. So it's really a combination of AI, simulations on normal computers, and eventually even quantum computing, how you can use those to create new materials that would help us, in this case, climate change. So one of the predictions is we'll be able to create materials that can actually much better filter out CO2 and capture carbon from emissions, and maybe even take that carbon and go use it for something useful like feedstock for new plastic or something. Another is trying to feed the world requires a lot of land, but also requires a lot of fertilizer, which is incredibly carbon impactful and energy intensive to create. Finding new ways of doing that that can actually be more efficient. And along those same lines, if we think about, in general, how do we use materials in our everyday products that make a difference? So one of the predictions is we'll find ways to rethink batteries, which is an increasing part of our renewable energy society, as well as electric cars. Can we find them to have better materials in them that are less impactful to the environment? And then maybe one that's a little bit closer to IBM's business, computer chips themselves are in everything we use today. Can we find ways of that manufacturing process, making it more sustainable? So these are all areas we think can actually help improve the climate side in particular.
Well, and there's so many different things there that all obviously problems that need to be tackled, and I think that's interesting. Certainly, it's prevalent right now when you talked about COVID-19 and the environmental things that are going on right now. So, seeing how tech could manage that, how do you go about actually creating these predictions? What's that process like to come to these solutions?
So we try and think about what are real challenges we're seeing today, right? And then things that maybe aren't just in IBM's normal business. Obviously, most of our research is focused on creating the next generation of computing technologies, AI, quantum, et cetera. But where are areas that there are challenges where our technology and expertise and our research could have unique impact, right? So if we're going to go out and try and help climate change around CO2, how can we do that? Well, we can find ways of using AI, for example, to really parse through all of the data out there to figure out what types of materials might be really good for capturing CO2. And then with that, even use AI to control robotics in our Zurich lab, for example, to try to make some of those materials and see different ways of doing the solutions. And if we come up with something of interest, then finding ways to partner with companies that then could take that out beyond what IBM could do in the end. You also mentioned COVID-19. The fifth prediction is actually some work we're doing there for helping to discover ways of getting better treatments for COVID-19. Creating a new drug molecule can take 10 years, billions of dollars, and we just don't have that kind of time. If we could use AI to kind of parse through literature to find drugs that already exist today for other purposes that could be repurposed to be used for COVID-19, that could really accelerate this process of finding some treatments.
Well, that's definitely exciting. And I would think, too, with the rapid advancement, like you said, the stuff that you're doing at IBM with artificial intelligence, quantum computing, different ways to try to speed up processing all that data, I would think that probably helps out exponentially, that this kind of thing could really spiral down to some really amazing advancements, I guess, in a quick amount of time.
That's right, because if you think about a doctor who's trying to repurpose drugs, so they have their experience, of course, the drugs they've used for things, and there's a huge amount of literature out there they could go read about other doctors' experiences, but they can't read more than a dozen papers, right? You can't read that many things along. If a system can go through, an AI system can go read a whole bunch of papers out there, all thousands and thousands, and find cases where a drug was used on a patient that had, say, 2 different diseases, it's being used for one disease, and the doctor notes, wait, it also seems to be helping this other disease. Those sorts of anecdotes, if the AI can bring that together to help a doctor then look at that, and they have to use their expertise then to say, okay, well, if it's doing that, maybe it would help for COVID-19. There's already been a couple cases where they're finding places where you can actually do this.
Well, it's really, really exciting just seeing what you've got there. And I love taking a look at, predictive reports of just where we think this technology can take us. It's always exciting to look at the positive sides of things, too, of how it can help us out. And for everybody out there who wants to learn more, where would be the best place for them to go to read the entire report?
So if you go to ibm.com/research, you will find the report right up there on our 5 and 5. You can just search for 5 and 5. I'm sure it will pop up as well. I also really encourage your listeners to look at the Urgency of Science report we put out this last week, because it really emphasizes this importance of using science to tackle society's problems. And that's not just going to be from IBM. We want that everyone in universities and other industries to be out there thinking about this.
Nice. Well, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us here. I really appreciate talking to you. I love the stuff that you're doing with this and finding out where tech can take us, and appreciate you being here on Digital Trends Live.
Great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
All right, so fantastic. Definitely encourage you to read that report. It's always interesting what IBM comes up with this 5-on-5, and just trying to see where technology can take us. But let's continue on here and talk about technology. We're going to talk about some entrepreneurs in particular, because joining us here, and this is part of a Hispanic Heritage Month segment that we are doing, but we're talking to really unique innovators and creators. And right now we're going to be joined by Carlos Garcia, who's the CEO and founder of Finhabits, which is a new way to actually manage your money. And Carlos, I want to say thank you very much for joining us. Really appreciate you being here on the show. And I wondered if you could walk us through what this exactly is, and maybe what some of the issues were that you saw as far as why you wanted to create it.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So Finhabits is the leading money app for Latinos in the country. I am the founder and CEO, and I started this company because I thought there was a need to have better access to high quality investment products for the Latino communities. And, in this country, historically, we've excluded people of color from main pathways of financial security. And I thought that there's a need to have an app that is simple enough that people can use their phone to have access to compound their money over time. I'm a Mexican-American entrepreneur with 15 years of experience in the fintech world, and this is my third company. And I'm very excited of what we've accomplished so far.
I think there's such important things too that you just touched on, the access to money and access to something that's easy to use, understandable to use for anybody. Because a lot of times when it comes to fintech, for all of us, it can get complicated and hard to use. So I think creating something that's simplified for that is great. What are some of the big obstacles, just to give people some more context, that you see that whether it's Mexican Americans or anybody else has in getting access to financial services?
So one of the obstacles that we have in the country is that it's very difficult for Latinos, in this case, to get access to 401ks. Latinos tend to work in small businesses, and small businesses have a hard time providing with a real retirement plan for their workers. So we decided that the best way to get Latinos to start saving for retirement is to offer them this access through a Roth IRA that we created, and we help them gain access. The other thing that we saw as an obstacle is that most of these Latinos and most of the people of color in the country that start saving, this is the first time they're investing. And it's even hard for them to understand the difference between a stock and a bond sometimes. So there's a need for education, and creating educational programs at scale through an app, sometimes it's difficult. So we figured out a way to really create an engagement model that helps people understand what's happening over time, and at the same time develop that financial habit that gets people excited and gets people out of where they are right now in a debt trap into a separate type of financial habit, which is being a capital owner and making wealth for their family.
Looking at where you're at right now, and as you said, you're the number one in this market in particular that you're in, where do you see this growing, and what are some other different ways that you can use what you've created here to even further make those offerings more robust?
So we are excited because as we continue to grow, we've seen that there is a very strong engagement in our community, and it's a community that we built organically. So they are building a relationship of trust with Finhabits. And what we think we can do is also create access to through the app to other financial services, perhaps insurance, perhaps loans in the future, and that's what we're planning to do. Make sure that we're always thinking of the end user first, and in this case, being a Latino myself and growing up in the border town of El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico, I have a unique perspective of what being a Latino is and what growing up as a Latino and not having access to these financial services is. So we're trying to, remove that barrier through the app.
Well, it's just really incredible what you've been able to do, and like you said, helping people gain access to these services that they need to make their businesses grow, to just help out everything in life, and I think that's fantastic what you've done. So for everybody out there too, who wants to use your app or know somebody who would be using your app, where is the best place for us to send them to use your services, rather?
You can download Finhabits from the App Store or Google Play. You can also subscribe to our platform, to our channels in YouTube at Finhabits or in Instagram, so you can learn more about what we offer.
So, Carlos, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks for being on here to share what you've done. Congratulations on the success and everything that you're doing, and thanks for being here on Digital Trends Live.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. So I always love talking to entrepreneurs and people who are creating ways to solve problems. And that's one of the great things about tech. And that is certainly something that is doing that right there. So finhabits.com, go there and check out everything they're doing. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We've got another edition of Tech Briefs. That's at the end of the week where we recap 3 of the biggest topics in tech from the week. And we're going to get Jeremy Kaplan's opinions on those today. So that's coming up next. Stick around. Back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. This is Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us wherever you are. We appreciate it. It is Friday. It's now time for another edition of Tech Briefs, where we catch you up to date on some of the biggest stories in tech from the last week. And joining me today for my co-host, it is Mr. Jeremy Kaplan. Jeremy, hello. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here, Greg. Always a pleasure to talk tech with you. And there's been an awful lot of stuff going on this week.
So much stuff. So let's get started on this too, and start off with, I guess, the first one going way back. Monday seems like so long ago, but this was a pretty big move when we're talking about the console wars between Microsoft with Xbox and Sony with PlayStation. Microsoft making a move to buy ZeniMax, which is a video game production company. You may not know that name, but you probably know Bethesda if you play any amount of games, because they're the ones with Elder Scrolls, with Fallout, with huge franchises. Microsoft paid $7.5 billion for them, which shows how big of a move they want to make and how important these games are. And I guess, Jeremy, to just ask you here right out of the gate, how do you feel about this move, I guess? And what does this mean when it comes to these console wars between Xbox and PlayStation 5?
Yeah, it's an enormous acquisition. So to put it in context, this is the 3rd biggest acquisition in Microsoft's history. LinkedIn was enormously costly and expensive, but this is So that was the biggest one, but this is about as much as they paid for Skype. Like, it's just an awful lot of money. But think about what comes with that. It's just a vast amount of some of the most popular games on the market. So what Microsoft's doing here is saying, we're the ones that have these, we have all these franchises, and there's sort of this conclusion that you have to come to that, well, if I'm going to get a console, if I'm going to get one of these next generation consoles coming out in the next couple of months, I probably want to get an Xbox because they have all the good games. But I don't think it's quite so cut and dry, right? Because Microsoft has been very clear that they will continue developing games and selling games for other platforms. So to me, what this is all about, yes, it's a business, of course. We could talk about the streaming market as well, but I think Microsoft has made a point in the past of saying, we're going to put out software for whoever, wherever the customer is, that's where we're going to go. So you see that with the new Surface Duo phone that they've got, which is running Android. They're not making their own software platforms anymore. We're just going to do it on Android. And I think the same thing is at play here. So we are going to see some of these popular titles are going to be coming over to the PlayStation 5. They'll probably be on Xbox as well. And perhaps they might be better on Xbox, who knows? But Microsoft is clear, we're going to publish across a range of different platforms. Wherever you are, that's where we're going to put the games out.
I think that's, definitely an interesting move on their part because, I mean, those kind of franchises, too, when you get something like Elder Scrolls or Fallout, I mean, those are going to be popular no matter what. You're going to make a ton of money. But $7.5 billion, I did not realize that's the second biggest acquisition or second or third, or whatever you just said right there. It's a huge acquisition. So that was a big one earlier this week. And we've got more details at digitaltrends.com. Going on to another big thing this week, and there's so much, so it's hard to even narrow down what the biggest topics were. But certainly Tesla with Battery Day, as Elon Musk called it. That was a big one because it's kind of Tesla combining their shareholder meeting with this big announcement about the batteries. And that's one of the big things, of course, with electric vehicles. Just to give you the facts, the new battery technology, he said, will allow for 50% more energy storage and 54% more miles per charge, essentially. They also unveiled the Model S Plaid, which is a ridiculous high-end electric vehicle, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds, 200
name.
miles per hour, I think it was. Yeah, it is. Yeah, the Model S Plaid at 520-mile battery life. It's also $140,000, so I don't think a lot of people are going to be picking that one up. But I think one of the big things was the saying that he thinks that they're going to be able to put out a $25,000 electric vehicle, a Tesla electric vehicle, within 3 years. And that, to me, seems like one of the biggest things from there. But I want to know your take. What do you think about this? And is this another thing that Elon can actually back up, or is it just more talk?
Yeah, I agree. That's a great price point. And for him to come out and say, we're going to be able to hit this next couple of years, that's putting a stake in the ground for sure. If anybody can do it, you got to think Elon Musk can. This is a man who's achieved most of what he's been saying. What I liked about the whole announcement that came out, there was just no fluff. When other companies come out and give their big unveilings of their new products, there's sometimes a little bit of hype and like, let's sell in the company and here's what look at how good we are, look at how big the App Store is. Not that I'm pointing fingers, Apple, but Elon Musk did not do that. There was a whole lot of really big announcements. To me, I think the big announcement was the 520-mile range. There's another company that's getting into EVs, and they're called Lucid. They make a car, or they're claiming to at some point make a car called the Lucid Air, which has a 517-mile range, which to me, when that came out a couple months back, we're like, wow, that's enormous. How do you do anything like that? And then Tesla comes along and says, 517, we got 520 over here. We can do it even better than you can. A little bit of one-upsmanship perhaps, but this is the company that's doing all of this cool battery technology, doing all the revolutions, making the science to make it work. And if anybody can, I think that they can. I think they have a lot of goodwill. It's a great brand name. People have a lot of confidence in them. I would not be surprised if they can hit both of those milestones. This is the guy that landed a rocket on a floating barge, for God's sake.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And with that, like you said, the brand name alone. So if they can get that down to the $25,000 price range, I mean, I know a lot of people who want Teslas, but right now that price range is just a little bit. You got to really, really want it to go for that price. But get it down to that. I mean, then it's comparable with pretty much any new gas vehicle that you're going to be getting. So that's a huge thing. So we'll see if that happens in the next few years. That's what he is saying with that. But again, we've got all the details of that at digitaltrends.com. All right, we need to get to topic number 3 because I know we've got some thoughts on this, and it has to do with Amazon with their event yesterday. There was the new hardware, which we expected, new Echo Dot. It looks like kind of like a snow globe now. You've got a home security drone, which is pretty impressive as far as I think as actually looking at it, whether it's something that a lot of people are going to use, I don't know. And you've got all kinds of other things that they put out as far as the hardware side of stuff. But then there's the other things. They have Amazon Luna getting into the streaming gaming market, which is already competitive. They've got kind of a unique take on that. But there's also a bunch of artificial intelligence news in Amazon Sidewalk. And that's why, rather than go through all of these, which we've got all details of digital trends that people can look, Jeremy, what do you think were the biggest takeaways from this?
Well, a couple things. One thing I want to highlight here is when Amazon's done these big device explosions in the past, they've kind of surprised us with something really weird, whether it's glasses that have Alexa built into them, whether it's a microwave that's got Alexa built into them. There's a lot of weird surprises. Kind of didn't get that this time around. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Although there were in a range of new devices, like including these new Echoes that are just these weird spheres. It didn't feel like there's a lot of evolution there. If you ask me. The drone thing I thought was kind of crazy. To your point, Greg, I don't know if people actually are going to want this. I don't know if I want a drone buzzing around my house. This is also the company that 5, maybe 6 years ago said, we're going to start delivering all sorts of your packages by drone. Greg, how many packages have you gotten delivered by drone in the last, 4 years?
None. And I want them so bad. I really want a drone delivery.
I think what we're going to see is, in terms of delivery, we're going to have delivery by drone vehicles, so wheels rather than wings. And I don't know if that's going to be anytime soon, but there are companies that are working on that. Drone delivery seems kind of crazy, but in your house, I don't know. There's something to it. It's kind of neat to be able to pilot that thing around, and then it operates on its own little path. So maybe, who knows? It's an interesting technology demonstration. More interesting to me was the behind-the-scenes stuff. So they announced a lot of evolution to Amazon Alexa. So the voice itself is going to be a lot more natural language sounding. It feels a lot more like a human being talking and less like a robot. It just takes countless man hours, an incredible amount of programming to make that happen. There's also some natural speech recognition such that Alexa is going to be able to recognize when you're having a conversation and what actions it should take out of that. I think that's very, very important change for how we interact with these devices, although it's honestly pretty creepy. What are you going to do? The other thing I wanted to mention, we talked briefly about Amazon Sidewalk, you mentioned just now. I think this is really kind of revolutionary. So it starts out from your Rings, right? Rings are able to already network amongst themselves, but Amazon's branding it now as Sidewalk. So Ring devices and other devices are going to network themselves together using this Bluetooth low power energy system, using a bunch of different networking technologies, and create a little network of their own with your next door neighbors. I'm not sure exactly where they're going with it, but it feels kind of like another platform that's being built out, maybe to compete with some of the existing technologies like Zigbee, Z-Wave. If Amazon owns yet another platform, it becomes much, much harder for anyone to compete with a company like that.
Right. I mean, and yet something like that, it is a really interesting thing that they're building with it. I think that some of the benefits they mentioned were great. It's like you can connect devices that are further away from your house. You could have something that's away from maybe your Wi-Fi network, but it could tap into somebody else's just at this low end. But yeah, I want to know more about it as far as how they're handling the security side of things. And it does seem kind of strange if you're networked in an entire neighborhood, in theory, where they're bouncing off of each other. But yeah,
what's cool, if you think about the Echo line of products, right? They started out as speakers. And oh, by the way, there's this assistant that's in there, right? You think back to 4 years ago or whatever, you were getting a speaker, and you could ask it to play some music, which, to be honest, is what most of us still do with these things. But it's also a Trojan horse to get into your house and to do some other stuff. And Amazon's built an ecosystem of other services they can sell to you based on the fact that you've got that thing in your house. I think they're doing the same thing with the line of Ring products, because this is the exact same service being built into something you're getting. You're not getting it for this, right? You're getting a Ring because it's a video doorbell. And now all of a sudden, it's got this extra feature. Maybe they can upsell it to you. Maybe it does more things. Maybe it's good for you. Who knows? It's just an interesting move from a company. It's Trojan horses all the way from Amazon these days.
Yeah. Well, and it's a fascinating thing to think about too, just where they're going to go with it. And like I said, we've got all the details of all of that and every other piece of hardware and everything else that we talked about at Digital Trends. You can dig into it, and I highly suggest that. The products are interesting in their own right, but some of the other stuff, the underlying technology, really fascinating to see where that goes. And Jeremy Kaplan, editor-in-chief of Digital Trends. I realized I didn't say your title at the beginning of this because I was so excited to get into it. He's the guy. And Jeremy, thank you so much. Always great talking tech with you and getting your opinions.
Likewise, my friend. Good seeing you.
Good to see you too. Jeremy Kaplan, Editor-in-Chief, Digital Trends. Check out everything we have there on the site about all of those articles. We've also got some great opinion pieces and some great things to think about. I want to recommend one. We've got an article up right now about how you talk to your friend or family member who may have gotten into some misinformation or maybe sharing things that might be a little bit shocking to you. How do you discuss it with them? We've got kind of an article that walks through that. So definitely suggest going there and reading that and everything else that we've got at the site. And I thank everybody for joining us. So taking a look here next week, well, we've got a lot going on as usual. We'll have all the tech news that you'll need. We'll have some great interviews. I can tell you this, there's some great interviews coming up next week. We'll also have, of course, Drew Prindle for Awesome Tech. Awesome Tech you can't buy yet. There you go. And that's going to be on Monday and everything else. And so just follow along, stay up to date with all the tech as it changes really quick. We will keep you on task with that. So follow at digitaltrends.com. I'm Greg Nibbler. Have a great weekend. I'll see you right back here on Monday with another edition of Digital Trends Live.